Tonight on KQED Newsroom, Senate Republicans reject a vote to hear from new witnesses and additional evidence in President Trump's impeachment trial. Also, the FBI's arrest of a top official in San Francisco prompts questions and concerns about corruption and cronyism at City Hall. And this Sunday, millions will tune in to see the San Francisco 49ers compete in the Super Bowl. We'll talk about their remarkable season and the tough contest ahead. Good evening and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Lily Jamali. We begin tonight with the Senate impeachment trial of President Trump. By a vote of 51 to 49, Senate Republicans have defeated the Democrats' push to hear from new witnesses in the trial. Senators Mitt Romney and Susan Collins were the only two GOP lawmakers to join Democrats in calling for witnesses like former National Security Advisor John Bolton. In a book manuscript, Bolton alleges that Trump told him he wanted to block military aid to Ukraine until it agreed to open investigations into the president's political rivals. Meanwhile, the trial has pulled Senators Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Amy Klobuchar off the campaign trail in Iowa. Voters there will be the first in the nation to pick a Democratic nominee in the 2020 presidential race when polls open Monday. Here to discuss this are Republican consultant and senior contributor to the Bulwark, Tim Miller. And joining us by Skype from Des Moines, Iowa is LA Times political writer Seema Mehta. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
And Tim, let's start with you here in the studio with me. Earlier today, we had Senator Lisa Murkowski say that she's basically going to be a no vote when it comes to hearing from new witnesses. She was obviously a critical swing vote in all of this. So is this officially defeat for the Democrats?
Yeah, that's the death knell. There's no, John McCain isn't walking through that door. Jeff Flake isn't walking through the door. The votes are not going to be there. I think that Romney will end up voting for witnesses. We'll see where he votes on acquittal, which I think there's still some interest in that, whether any Republicans will vote for acquittal or removal. But at the end of the day, look, Mitch McConnell did not want to extend this out unnecessarily. I think that the Republican senators did not see any benefit from this. The cake was baked as soon as it came into the Senate. There were never going to be 2/3 votes, and so why extend this out and risk more potential damage by having these witnesses? So I think they're going to jam it through this weekend, at the latest Wednesday next week.
Well, what about the long game here, Tim? I mean, come election time, could this actually be a very good thing for the Democrats, the way this all turned out?
Potentially. Here's the thing that's flummoxing to me, is that McConnell and the Republicans don't really know the details of what they're covering up. I mean, they know the gist of what happened. I think that you saw in Rob Portman's statement and Lamar Alexander's statement that they understand that the president basically did what he's accused of. You know, they might quibble on a few things here and there, but they didn't think it was impeachable. But what they don't know is how much evidence there is. So now we have 6 months. You know, John Bolton's book will come out. The president is certainly known to have feuds with other ex-staffers. Other ex-staffers might come out with more information. We've seen Lev Parnas, obviously, he's going to have to go to trial where more information could come out. So I think in that way it could benefit the Democrats if really damning information comes out in the fall rather than now, you know, in January when we're far away from the election.
Seema, to you out there in Iowa, how has this been playing there? Are voters talking about this? How much do they seem to care about impeachment?
I mean, in terms of when you go to Democratic events, you know, and you talk to voters about this, they certainly care, but this is not something that they sort of bring up organically. That, you know, they figured that, you know, the House voted for this, but they knew that the Senate wasn't going to go there. So it was sort of, you know, they knew what the outcome was going to be. Democratic voters, when you talk to them, they obviously wanted to see the president impeached, but they're really more concerned about talking about health care, talking about, you know, immigration, talking about issues that, you know, matter to them. When you see them ask questions of the candidates, that's where they go. They don't go to impeachment.
You had a big night last night with the president in town holding a political rally. How did he do?
I mean, he had a huge packed audience. He spoke for an hour and 40 minutes. And he was in fine form, and he seemed to be in a good mood. He brought out Sarah Huckabee Sanders. He had the governor there. I mean, he had a lot of his old early Iowa supporters, and the crowd. I mean, the crowd was loving him. So I think it's a real question. Obviously Democrats are so focused on winning back Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, but I think Iowa's going to be an interesting question in the general election because they've twice voted for President Obama before voting for President Trump, and in the congressional races in the midterms, they elected 2 Democratic members of Congress. So I think Iowa will be really interesting to watch come November.
And within the Democratic field of candidates, who did he seem to take the most aim at last night?
He focused on Biden, as he always said, but last night he was really into pronouncing Mayor Pete Buttigieg's last name. It was I hadn't seen this before, and he just kept repeating it over and over again, but he was pronouncing it boot edge edge, which is actually how the mayor's campaign pronounced. They have like swag and T-shirts and buttons that have it spelled out that way. So I don't know. That was unusual.
That's pretty funny. Tim, to you, I'm wondering. You've had 3 really big named candidates, 3 senators, take a lot of time away from the campaign trail in Iowa because of this. Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders. How much do you think this has hurt them in terms of their prospects?
Boy, I think that probably like me, who has done a number of campaigns in Iowa, is feeling jealous of SEMA getting to be there in the action this week. Those senators wish they were there. But I'm not sure that it really has harmed any of them except maybe Amy Klobuchar. I think that Bernie obviously has a lot of momentum right now. He's a very grassroots-based campaign. I think that's carrying a lot of that momentum. I think Warren has used her opportunity in the Senate to continue to make news as she took shots at John Roberts yesterday. Klobuchar, on the other hand, Iowa's really kind of make or break for her. And if she is not in the top 3 on Monday, the campaign's going to be over. And so I do think it would have benefited her to be able to be in the Hawkeye State, trying to kind of rally some last-second momentum, which some recent polls show is, I don't think, outside of the realm of possibility for her.
Seema, do you agree with that? Do you think this has hurt Klobuchar's momentum? She got that big endorsement from the New York Times last week.
I do think she's having a bit of a moment here, and I think throughout this campaign, people wondered if she would have a moment. She's put it all of her chips in Iowa. She's spent the most time here out of any major candidate, and she's hoping that these events that she's had, for the past year, that'll carry her through. With the senators out of town, with the senators all in D.C., they've had a number of surrogates running around. Bernie has like famous bands on college campuses. Elizabeth Warren has people like Congresswoman Katie Porter from Orange County. Amy Klobuchar has she has like the mayor of Fertile, Iowa, and she's proud of that. She's very proud of that. But she doesn't have like the big stars that some of the other candidates have.
The mayor of what? The mayor of where, Sue?
I think it's Fertile, Iowa.
Man, I did 3 campaigns in Iowa, and I don't even know what that town is. So that tells you.
I hope I'm not messing up the name. It's a tiny little town. But that said, I mean, she did do a lot of media hits in D.C. With Iowa media. She's trying to get out here as much as she can. But I do think if it hurts anybody, it does sort of hurt her the most because Bernie Sanders, he's certainly surging. Elizabeth Warren, she's had a little bit of a slip, but she has a ton of money. She has a plan to go forward. New Hampshire is like a neighboring state, so she's expected to do well there. With Amy Klobuchar, if she really doesn't do well here, if she doesn't hit that 15% viability threshold, which she needs to hit to win any delegates, it's hard to see how she continues her campaign, quite frankly.
Tim, let's go back to the impeachment trial. I'm wondering from you, I mean, we had this fascinating situation where John Bolton is suddenly a hero on the left. Whoever thought that could have happened, but it has.
Strange bedfellows.
Strange bedfellows indeed. How is he being viewed on the right this week in these last couple weeks?
Boy, I think in the right-wing media, basically nothing short of as a traitor. And he's just being filleted in everything from, Breitbart and the Federalist, Fox News, OAN. I think the senators have been cautious. It depends on which kinds of senators they are. A lot of them have personal relationships with him, and kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt. The problem I think that Bolton realizes is he's running into this when you're in the middle of the road, you're going to get run over, that old aphorism. And he, I think, is he wants to have a future in the Republican Party, unlike some of the people who have turned on Trump, like Scaramucci, who I think just wants to get on the Today Show. Bolton wants to have a future in the conservative media, right? And so I think he's been trying to play this coy where he's being honest about what happened, but not trying to go overboard. And this tightrope that he's trying to walk, I think he has fallen off it. And so I'm not sure, at the end of the day, the resistance folks who were, happy to use him to get the president impeached, now that impeachment's over, hard to see them embracing him, hard to see the Trumpers embracing embracing him. I don't know where he really lands.
I'm also really fascinated by how much we heard from Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. He's gotten more airtime than probably he ever has in his entire life this week. And he's been sort of the adult in the room. How has he come out in all of this?
It almost feels like it's out of a time warp, right? You know, like on Twitter and on cable, you know, we're in this very Trumpian era where all the senators are taking, you know, kind of very you know, childish digs at one another. You know, there's a lot of trolling happening with the questions. Like people were trolling Roberts, making him read strange questions. Rand Paul did this. Elizabeth Warren did this.
Right, trying to get the name of the whistleblower out there, which John Roberts refused to do.
Right, and Roberts is it's like the old videos from the Nixon impeachment when you see Roberts, right? And he is acting, I think, with a sense of decorum and has come out of this well. But he definitely almost seems out of era for kind of where we are at in our politics right now.
Seema, we're going to end with you in Iowa. You know, President Trump has a big interview ahead of the Super Bowl on Sunday. Is he going to be running a victory lap?
I suspect so. I mean, he's also doing a ton of stuff out here. In addition to the big rally he had last night, he has something like 80 surrogates who are going to be all over the state on Monday, on caucus day. So, you know, even though Democrats have sort of dominated the discussion here because of the caucuses, he's making sure that his voice is going to be heard here.
All right. It's so good to have both of you here. Seema Mehta from the LA Times out there in Des Moines, Iowa for us on Skype. And of course, right here with me, Tim Miller, Republican strategist and senior contributor to The Bulwark. Thanks so much to both of you.
Have fun in Iowa, Seema.
Thank you.
Earlier this week, San Francisco Public Works Director Mohamed Nuru was arrested by the FBI and charged with fraud by the U.S. Attorney's Office in San Francisco. Also arrested was Nuru's business partner and restaurateur Nick Bovis. Nuru and Bovis are accused of multiple fraud schemes, including attempted bribery of an airport official to win a contract for a restaurant lease. Nuru was appointed head of Public Works in 2011 by late Mayor Ed Lee. The department's annual budget of hundreds of millions of dollars funds dozens of city services, including keeping streets clean, trimming trees, and clearing homeless encampments. With me now is Mission Local managing editor and columnist Joe Eskenazi and KTVU crime reporter Henry Lee. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Lily.
Joe, let's start with you. Who is the guy at the center of all of this? Mr. Clean, as he's known, Mohamed Nuru.
Well, Mr. Clean is his Twitter handle, and there's a lot of schadenfreude about that, but his job is cleaning the streets, so I don't think that that was meant to be any kind of play on words. He has been in the Department of Public Works for 20 years, since Willie Brown brought him there in 2000, and he was appointed, as you mentioned, director in 2011 and full-time 2012 by his former boss, Mayor Ed Lee, who was also a head of Public Works. This was controversial because he had a long history of ethical lapses before that. But as I've written before, I don't think those ethical lapses kept him from getting the job. Obviously, I think they got him the job.
Interesting. Henry, you were actually in court on Tuesday for the arraignment. What was it like in there?
Well, Mr. Nuru and Mr. Bovis were brought in one at a time. Mr. Nuru was there without his trademark cap, seemed a little befuddled. He was arrested for the second time, actually, because he allegedly blabbed about the existence of the investigation. So he was in court, as was Mr. Bovis. Bovis, of course, is the owner of Lefty O'Doul's, that recently moved to Fisherman's Wharf. So both men longtime friends. There were some tweets that I found where they go back many, many years and talk about how good friends they are. And
Bovis actually, it's emerged as a little bit of a local hero, given his interactions with the city and, you know, real estate issues, rent issues. Can you tell us a little bit about his background and who he is?
Yeah, he's like a glad hander. He would have people over at his business for toy drives and, you know, dinners and get-together, earthquake celebrations. There would be people there, and he seemed to know everyone, as did Nuru.
So you mentioned that he has this extra charge against him, Mohamed Nuru does, and I'm wondering from you what that might indicate about, you know, what the feds had planned before they had to blow this case open.
Well, they admitted at the time, the special agent in charge admitted at the press conference Henry and I were at, that they did not plan to be there that day, but for the fact that Mohamed Nuru allegedly talked about the ongoing investigation, which he had promised not to do. He's facing a 5-year prison sentence for lying to the FBI about when they asked him, did you do this?
And there's a real sense that perhaps he was not the person or people that the feds were really after ultimately,
not at
right?
all. No. I mean, you mentioned a $5,000 bribe to get a chicken restaurant into the airport. Other schemes include bid rigging a bathroom contract and having city contractors come and work on Mohamed Nuru's house for cheap or free and gifting him a John Deere tractor.
There's something a little small-timey about a lot of these crimes,
it's
right?
a lot small-timey, but it's not the crimes. It's the process. It's not the plot of this movie. It's the scenery. And there's an atmosphere of casual corruption here that's been caught on multiple wiretaps. I don't think that these small-time crimes from the director of public works of a mid-sized city was the ultimate goal. I think that, that obviously they were going to try to get Mohamed Nuru to cooperate with them. All of the infractions occurred in 2018 and 2019. He was first arrested on January 21st, 2020.
And the dominoes have already fallen. We've seen Linda Creighton, vice president of the San Francisco Airport Commission, resign citing health issues. Now, of course, the feds say that she was the attempted target of a $5,000 bribe, but ultimately said no. So we're trying to see who else is involved here.
Joe, what about Mayor Breed? I think a lot of us are wondering if she may be touched by this.
Well, that remains to be seen. Certainly, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but it's hard to ignore the fact that Mohamed Nuru was brought into city government 2 decades ago by Willie Brown. Many people have been seated into the departments in government where things either get stopped up or don't get stopped up by Willie Brown, by Rose Pack, by others. And Mayor Breed is among that coterie of people who remain influential in the city. We don't know whether she's caught up or not, but there are going to be some mutual acquaintances here, and the potential is there. As we said, obviously the ultimate goal wasn't to get Mohamed Nuru or Nick Bovis.
I mean, this is somebody who had a past. He had whistleblowers come out against him, as you mentioned at the top, multiple years ago. So he was a known commodity. I mean, I know you're talking to sources, and that is coming out, that there is not all that much surprise that this happened.
When I was calling around, and I had learned that it was Mohamed, and I was calling to get second sources to say, and I was being very oblique, and I was saying, I heard there's an FBI press conference tomorrow. I heard a city official was arrested, and people just blurted out, oh, was it Mohamed? So this didn't come as a huge surprise to people. Mm-hmm. But as I noted, his lengthy checkered ethical past, there is a utility to putting someone like that in positions of good power and influence to get done what you want them to get done.
Mm-hmm. Henry, I want to ask you about the global reach of this. That's a phrase that the U.S. Attorney David Anderson used when bringing these allegations forth. This was not just a local story. There's something much bigger happening here.
Right. It's been determined that a Chinese billionaire by the name of Zhang Li allegedly tried to curry favor with the city through Nuru. So Nuru apparently went on trips to China with the help of Mr. Li. So a lot of tentacles extending across the globe here.
And there's also a bigger story in terms of, the city and the complaints that we hear about regarding cleanliness of the streets and the handling of homelessness. And this is at its core, in some respects, also a housing and homelessness story, isn't it?
I guess you could say so. As we've noted before, all of the alleged schemes are really small-timey, and they involve small amounts of money, though the Chinese billionaire one does stick out, and much prying will be done to see exactly what Mohamed Nuru did or didn't do and what progress was made on 555 Fulton, which is the project. But people could get angry looking at the condition of the city and knowing that the budget of Department of Public Works has doubled, tripled, quadrupled in the last decade.
We've seen estimates that it's as high as $500 million. That is a lot of money. 1,500 people work in this department. You
can't go throughout the city without seeing some public works employees or seeing what they do. It's the most forward-facing department in all the city.
And we can't ignore the fact that President Trump has made hay of this crisis that the city is up against. And I know that people are also wondering, given that, we have the Trump administration in power right now and the Department of Justice is to some extent an extension. I mean, ideally, these people who are running these departments, the U.S. Attorney, these are independent bodies. However, is there anything political about this? This is a question I've heard a lot this week.
Well, David Anderson, the U.S. Attorney, this is probably the 8th news conference he's held in office, and his predecessor, I can't even count on one hand how many he's had, but it's very clear. When Mr. Anderson had some news conferences about let's clean up the tenderloin, it's very clear. He is moving in a sense where Some argue that San Francisco has not. So you see a lot of interplay with the feds coming in. They keep on repeating our federal buildings in the Tenderloin. We see a lot of crime. This has got to stop.
Well, I mean, we're giving them the material. As much as Trump et al. Would love to nail San Francisco to the wall, we are giving them the material. That being said, I'm sure that Donald Trump will be shocked at a wealthy billionaire developer trying to influence a city official.
Much more to come with this story. I know you guys are going to be all over it. Joe Eskenazi of Mission Local and Henry Lee of KTVU. It's so great to have both of you.
Thanks for having us in.
Joining me now by phone from Miami is senior writer and the host of the ESPN Daily podcast, Mina Kimes. Hey, Mina.
Hi.
It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's begin with the fact that neither of these teams has won a Super Bowl in this millennium. So you have the 49ers. They haven't brought the trophy home in 25 years, 50 years for the Chiefs. I'm wondering from you, both of these teams obviously really want to win. What kind of matchup can we expect on Sunday?
There's a lot of excitement amongst just general NFL fans and also analysts for this game because it really does feel like the two best teams, which doesn't always happen with the Super Bowl. In particular, the Chiefs offense and the San Francisco 49ers defense is an incredible strength-on-strength matchup. Also, you've got really two of the best offensive minds in the NFL in Andy Reid and Coach Kyle Shanahan, two of the best tight ends. There is really a lot of tremendous matchups for, I think a game that these fan bases are also really thrilled for. As you mentioned, they haven't been here in a while, and you're seeing that in Miami because they really traveled.
So can we expect a high-scoring game?
I think so. I've been really reluctant to pick, and I think a lot of people have. It's reflected in the line. It's basically a pick 'em. But I do believe that both of these offenses are actually better than the defenses they're facing. So I think it could end up being pretty high scoring, but we always say that, and then last year you get 13-3, so you never know.
Yeah, so let's get to it. Who do you think is going to win?
So I put my pick on the record, and I've said San Francisco, 34-31.
Our audience is going to like that.
Yeah, pandering to your listeners. Just because I think that they're more balanced. It's really hard to pick against Patrick Mahomes now, the Chiefs quarterback. I mean, he's having a postseason likes of which we just really haven't seen in a long time. And he's also really good at a lot of things that should make Niners fans worried, in particular his mobility, which is something that the San Francisco defense has struggled with at times. But that San Francisco defense is also completely healthy now. And when they're healthy, that front four in particular is just absolutely terrifying. And they're going to need to get home against Mahomes because his weapons have so much speed that unless he's under pressure, it could be a difficult game.
And let's also talk about 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo. How is he viewed by fans and also people who watch the game closely like you do?
He's barely had to do anything in this postseason. So it's been funny. People are calling him a system quarterback and a game manager, but I don't think it's the right way to look at it because, as Coach Shanahan said when he was asked, after the NFC Championship, why Jimmy barely threw the ball and why they ran so much, he said, because it's working, right? It's really more about the strength of the run game and how efficient it's been and less about Jimmy, I think. He's had some pretty high highs this season, in particular the Saints game. There were moments earlier in the year when he did turn the ball over and sometimes struggled to read the middle of the field. But I don't think he's a weakness. He's not on Mahomes' level, I'm not going to lie, but I think if the ball is let's just put it this way, if he has to win the game for them, I think he's perfectly capable of that. He actually leads the NFL in third down passes. He's been great in the fourth quarter, and I think he's just such a great play action quarterback, and the Niners have a really good offense for that.
And we talked about that season-ending injury, the ACL tear in 2018. What has struck you about the comeback that Jimmy Garoppolo has made since then?
It's funny. These days with ACL injuries, it is remarkable not only how quickly players can come back thanks to developments in modern medicine, but how they look, how explosive they can be. I mean, he's not Mahomes in terms of running around, but when he bootlegs out or throws on the move, he looks as good as ever. And it really, you never want to see players get hurt, but it certainly worked in San Francisco's favor because they had that losing season. They were able to get Nick Bosa at number 2 in the draft, which is very unusual to pick that high when you already have your quarterback, but their quarterback was injured. So that ends up putting them in the position to, build this elite defense.
Let's step back for a moment. I love the game of football, but I don't watch the game of football. I actually haven't watched a Super Bowl since 2015, which I know as a Seattle Seahawks fan is a game you remember quite well. But I'm wondering, it's hard to watch given what we have learned about brain injuries in the game and CTE. I know you care about that issue too. How do you cover the game while kind of balancing those concerns?
Well, I just try to be honest about them. And I think a lot of the issues around brain injuries in football were not discussed openly for a very long time. And I think until around 2009, 2010, the league was either not being honest about it or, obfuscating. And there was a lot of tremendous journalism, some done by my colleagues at ESPN around that time that began. I think players at the time also weren't as aware of the risks of playing. Now, that doesn't make it any easier when you see a concussion happen on the field, and you can see it when it happens, when a player is carted off, and maybe not even from a concussion, but from some other brutal injury because it's such a violent sport. But I do think, our job, my job, and I think the job of the league at this point and the teams is to be as transparent about it. Because, when you do watch the sport, you are making something of a compromise. You're saying, yes, this is part of the game, and I'm still going to watch it anyways, in the same way that the players who play it are aware of that now. And, it can be difficult at times, but I've always felt the most important thing is just to be honest about it.
And do you think that's a view that is shared by your colleagues who also cover the NFL?
I do, yeah. It's, especially the reporters, many of whom have been tracking this a lot longer than I've been covering the league, quite frankly. But we're always looking at they track the number of concussions, for example, and that's something we report on and follow. And a lot of them don't always necessarily they're not always discussed. And I think players all have very different attitudes towards playing through pain, playing through head injuries, but as reporters, we try to do our best to monitor, keep that conversation going every season as the rules change.
Absolutely. Well, Mina, thank you so much for making the time. We really appreciate this. Mina Kimes is senior writer and host for the ESPN Daily Podcast. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And that'll do it for us. As always, you can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Lily Jamali. Thank you so much for joining us.